sea that came up from the Gulf of Mexico and came up as far as southeastern Missouri. And this sea, known as the Gulf Sea, was an extension of the Gulf of Mexico. It came all the way across Louisiana and Arkansas and filled in with sediments what is known as the embayment. It's an area that extends south of southeastern Missouri, across Arkansas, parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, and this sea teemed with life. It was the sea at the end of the Cretaceous period, and the Cretaceous period is the last subdivision, the last geologic subdivision of geologic time of what is known as the Mesozoic Era, the age of dinosaurs, the age of reptiles, the age of what are sometimes called ruling reptiles, but generally known as the age of dinosaurs. Here is a geologic map of the deposits that were deposited, the sediments or sedimentary rocks that were deposited by that sea that covered the embayment area. And this is a, you can see the Gulf of Mexico down here. Here's Mississippi. There's Arkansas to the left of that. And up here where my finger is, way up in here, is southeastern Missouri. And that area of outcrop that you see on this map is the area that deposits of that sea are exposed on this surface or just below the surface, exposed underneath soil and what is known as regolith, exposed on the surface. And in places, not too many places, but in places these sediments, which often are rather poorly consolidated, that is, they're rather soft. Unlike similar age sediments in the western United States, the sediments of the Cretaceous in the Gulf area were never deeply buried. So they're relatively soft. They've never undergone what is known as lithification, which is the formation of actual rock, hard rock. For the most part, Gulf sediments are relatively soft. But that green area that you see right there, kind of forming a band, is the area of outcrop or potential outcrop of this Gulf series of the Cretaceous period of the Mesozoic Era. These sediments, you see in green, the Cretaceous sediments of the Gulf Coast region, were first studied before the Civil War. And it was realized that there were a few places that they were just packed with fossils. One of these was in Mississippi, another one of them was in Tennessee. And this map that you see right here was made in 1915, and it shows the area of outcrop of those sediments that were known in 1915. But you'll notice up here in this corner, right up in here, that they do not go across into Missouri. They are on the eastern side of the Mississippi, and the reason they don't is because they were not yet discovered in the 19th century. In fact, they were not discovered until the 1930s in a program it was a WPA program during the Depression to investigate for clay beds, for the possibility of clay beds that could be mined for bricks and ceramic materials, investigating areas in southeastern Missouri, that it was discovered that there are sediments of Cretaceous age of the Gulf series in southeastern Missouri, around parts of Stoddard County in southeastern Missouri, which is essentially southwest of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And one of these areas was a little town that's still a very, very little town by the name of Ardeola. But there were found to be in the area around Ardeola quite a few fossils, and the fossils were quite diverse. One of the characteristics of these Gulf sediments is that they have a very rich fauna. A lot of times Cretaceous marine sediments have large numbers of one type of organism and not too much diversity. But the sediments in the Gulf area, in some areas, not all of them, can be very rich in not only a variety of invertebrates, but there can be quite a bit of diversity in that variety, a very rich fauna. And such was the case with the area in southeastern Missouri. Here's some of the example of some of this diversity of late Mesozoic marine life from southeastern Missouri. This is known as this pinna, or a razor clam, and you can see this one from Ardeola is both part and counterpart, and preserved usually as, in this case, as internal molds. But this is a type of a clam called a razor clam. Here's another late Mesozoic marine fossil. It's known as a shipworm, or teredo. It's a fossil of a type of worm that can infest wooden ships and cause their destruction. This originally was burrowed in a piece of wood that has been decayed, but the cast, or the filling of the shipworm, has been preserved. Yet here is another marine invertebrate, a snail or gastropod known as Turritella. You can see a large number of these embedded in sediment that was preserved by being buried on the floor of this ocean. And Turritella is a high-spired snail or gastropod, typically characteristic of the late Mesozoic era. Here's some more of them. They're actually one of the most abundant fossils at the Ardeola locality. Probably what is one of the neater fossils from the Mesozoic are known as Ammonites. Ammonites were a type of what is called a cephalopod. The octopus and the squid are examples of living cephalopods. But Ammonites had very complex shells. Some believe that they were the shelled version of the octopus. The octopus essentially is an ammonite that lost its shell and survived until the present. But the ammonites went extinct at the end of the Mesozoic. There's a massive extinction event, which is suspect to be from this asteroid or comet that hit the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico about 67 million years ago, and essentially produced havoc worldwide, destroyed ecosystems, and resulting in some 85% of the Earth's life going extinct as a consequence of that impact. And Ammonites are one of the fatalities. Here's an Ammonite. They have very interesting shaped shells. This is internal mold from southeastern Missouri, from Cretaceous deposits in southeastern Missouri. And here's a couple of more. And a couple of more. Can't get enough of them. These have some of the original shell. These are not from Missouri. These are from Mississippi, from what is called the Owl Creek locality of the Owl Creek Formation in Mississippi. And here's another Missouri one. And a larger Ammonite from Madagascar. And notice the iridescence on the shell. This is original material that has been preserved. Original Ammonite shell material. And it has preserved the iridescence of the original Ammonite. These are very desirable fossils. And here is a piece of an Ammonite showing the iridescence, green and red, of the original Ammonite shell. This is from Alberta. They actually make this into jewelry, pieces of this. It's known as Ammonite. And this is just a fragment of a very big Ammonite. But notice the color, which is iridescence. Associated with Ammonites are one of the ruling reptiles known as a Mosasaur. And here is a Mosasaur jaw section. Rather nasty animal that apparently preyed on Ammonites. Because where Ammonites are found in quantity, you also find the teeth and the jaw sections and the bones of these, what are essentially huge marine lizards, known as the Ammonite. Wherever Ammonites are found, you generally find pieces of this ruling Mesozoic reptile known as a Mosasaur. And this is the jaw of a Mosasaur. Mosasaurs are found in southeastern Missouri. This one is from Morocco. And lastly, a huge Ammonite from southeastern Missouri. you can see there where it is in the rock. This is when it was collected and has been removed from the rock and strengthened and preserved. Some of these show bite marks apparently made by mosasaurs. It's very apparent that mosasaurs were preying on these, particularly these big ammonites like this, which could provide quite a bit of a meal to a mosasaur. It's heavy.